I, Telegard Advance. Telegard full. Telegard close to colors. Please repeat sworn. Recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Telegard about face. Telegard retreat.
Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, let's give a big clap and a big thank you to our troops this morning for coming out. So we had Troop 219, Troop 220, and Troop 3219. So they all teamed up and came out this morning. They were out there in the lobby, and I know they were stretching because early in the mornings, right? It's okay, you can laugh this morning. I know it's only 8 o'clock. So my name is Steve Williams. I'm the Fulton County Farm Bureau President, and on behalf of Farm Bureau and the Fulton County Chamber of Commerce, we want to thank you for coming out this morning, and we definitely want to thank the Akron Community Center for allowing us to have this event here. So this morning, we've got a little additional interaction and blessing this morning. Not only do we have Jack Jordan coming to support from the state, but we have Griffin Nate from Rudy Occam's office. And so I will go ahead and ask them to come on up, and we will open the floor after they do their morning addresses. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming.
All right, thank you. Good morning. This is really nice. I thought Griffin Nate was going to do the whole thing, and I was going to be in the audience, but last time he said I had to present too. So, well, what I did is I did not spend a lot of time on it, but I did provide some handouts, and obviously I'm not going to go through them. But before I get to the handouts, I do want to frame kind of my remarks, because I think this is really important. Indiana has a great constitution, and I read it about every 3 months just to remind myself on what I'm supposed to be doing as a state representative. And every time I read it, I'm just, first of all, just impressed by the document itself. And then secondly, just reminded on what our role in the legislative branch is supposed to be. But I think the preamble really does a great job, because before we get into government solving problems, which I say that a little bit just, the preamble says, to the end that justice be established, public order maintained, and liberty perpetuated, we the people of the state of Indiana, grateful to Almighty God for the free exercise of the right to choose our own form of government, do ordain this Constitution. And I think why the preamble is so important, because it tells us why all the rest of it is going to be in there. And it's really specific. It's really for justice, the rule of law, public safety. We need police officers in courts, Judge Heller, and liberty perpetuated. So we are really trying to hold back government from taking away our liberty. And so I frame that because I'm going to get into remarks about what the government's doing and trying to solve problems. And I need to be really careful to not go down the road of government solving a lot of problems, because so much of our problems are spiritual, social, family, that government basically doesn't really help and sometimes makes worse. I know that's not a word, but much worse. But what I did want to share with you today is on the back side. I won't go through the front side because I'm the chair of the budget subcommittee in House Budget Subcommittee. So I spent the last 90% of my time in the first half of the session just on budget. So if you go to the bottom, just a big overview is on K-12, and again, this is not the final budget. The House passes the budget, it goes to the Senate, then we negotiate back and forth, and then the last couple of days scramble, and then we end up with the budget. But what we proposed is, first of all, our priority is K-12 education and funding. Last biennium, we spent about $18 billion as a state for tuition support. That's up now $1.6 billion to $20.6 billion over the 2 years for state support. That doesn't include property taxes that goes toward school funding and things like that. So this is strictly tuition support. So you can see a healthy increase in K-12 education. Higher ed is about 10% of the state budget. We actually fund about 15% of higher education. The rest comes through tuition and other capital expenditures. But in fairness, the state has built most of those buildings on our state institutions, so it's a little bit more than what you think through tuition. And then the big killer right now is this Medicaid. Medicaid, 4 years ago, was about 14% of our state budget. It's now up to 18%, and there's really no end in sight. This is a federal program that is mostly paid for by federal dollars, still our dollars, let's remind ourselves. And a lot of the state is matching funds that we do for Medicaid. But even with that, we don't see an end in sight in this growth of Medicaid. And many in this room obviously understand what's going on as far as demographics, as far as socioeconomic, generational poverty, older folks and long-term care that are funded through Medicaid. And so that is going to continue to put pressure on our state budget. And some of you might have strong feelings one way or another on that line item, but it's a reality that it just is going to continue to grow. Health and Human Services, about 9%. That's mostly DCS, Department of Childhood Services, and FSSA. And so again, just tragic life situations that are just heartbreaking. And again, the government is trying to get in, along with our current DCS members, trying to get involved more with churches, local churches, as they're really close to people and can make a significant difference in people's lives. And then public safety, 2%, corrections, 4%, general government, 6%, capital, 3%. A lot of the capital expenditures being proposed here are for renovations. I mean, a lot of our state buildings are right at that point, both at the university level, both at the state governmental level, that need renovation. We don't need a lot of new buildings. We're at that point, that 50, 70-year point with a lot of our buildings that need a little bit of renovation. So at the end of the day, it's again an education budget. I mean, for lack of a better term, spend a lot of money on education. Unfortunately, we spend a lot of money on other items that are just, it's just sad that we have to spend money on them. But as far as the education, we heard feedback from a lot of parents that are tired of paying for book fees. So our budget actually, for the first time ever, would cover book fees for parents and for kids. The other thing that's that we really focus on, the other priority, are tax cuts. So as most of you in this room know, we have a surplus. The reason why we have a surplus is really the Fed's pumped a whole bunch of money. Let's pick on Griffin Nate as much as we can today, because the money supply that went up over the last couple of years, you can't blame it on Griffin, but it's just, when money supply goes up, Milton Friedman tells us inflation is going to go up. And when inflation goes up, being a sales tax state, guess what happens? Tax revenues skyrocket. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to pay down debt and get the tax cuts in place so we don't have this surplus. Now the trick is, there's a lot of people who want to spend a lot of money, and trying to hold that back has been interesting to say the least. But we did cut taxes $625 million over the biennium, and I think there's more to come on that. So we're really focused on, at the very, very, very macro level on the budget, is first of all getting tax cuts in place, because we know that we're going to continue to run surplus if we don't get those tax cuts in place. We want to have a buffer in case things go south, if there's a recession. So we want to maintain about 12% of our general funds in reserve, which, that's about what we should probably do in our households. Then we want to invest in education, because that's the heart of what we have a constitutional duty. Section 8 of the Constitution Article 8 of the Constitution is very clear that the General Assembly is to provide for education. And then the last thing is just to say no to a lot of stuff. The other thing I'm going to highlight to this group, because I don't know how many of you, the survey goes out at the beginning of every session, and I read all of them. I mean, I get what, 1,100 or something, but the Fulton County surveys are different than Marshall County. It's fascinating. You guys focus on a couple of things. One thing is vocational and technical education. If it comes up 20 times, it comes up 100 times on more practical stuff in our K-12 education. I mean, it just does. And so we've done a couple things on that front. A lot of you have written in, our kids need Dave Ramsey training. And so for the first time ever, we did put in Dave Ramsey training, but Dave Ramsey light training, that before somebody graduates from high school, they have to take a financial literacy course so they know how to manage their finances, they understand debt, they understand household income taxes, all those things. And so we put that in there. And the other thing, House Bill 1002 is really focused on work-based learning. So it's really hard now to do work-based learning because the state has so many requirements on schools as the core 40. And so once you have the core 40 classes, there's not much buffer to be able to do other things. So what we're challenging our Department of Education to help us with is how can we maybe have a core 20 of classes, and then have high schools have a lot more flexibility on work-based learning, on vocational education, etc. So I think we're doing some good stuff, and I just laugh because it's Fulton County folks that just really get down into the practical stuff that we need to be doing on education. So we're moving in that direction, so I just want to let you know that that's taking place. So that's really the only, and then the other thing I provided for you, I'm not going to go through it obviously, is what's great about Indiana. It's really hard to get down about your state and where we live and stuff like that. But no matter how you cut it, Indiana, as far as fiscal responsibility, both at the state level and local level, is number one or top 5, no matter how you measure it. It's a really careful state with using taxpayers' money. And again, that's both at the state level and at the local level. And so we've got our strengths, we have our weaknesses, but fiscal responsibility is not one of them. I mean, that's kind of the Hoosier mentality. We're fiscally conservative for the most part. We really believe that taxpayer money is their money and not our money. Now, if we could just get the federal government to head in that direction. And it's not his fault. He's going to fix it all single-handedly. But I just provided this because there are good things going on in our state that we don't toot our own horn enough. That's the Hoosier mentality too. It's kind of like, we're doing our job, so let's go out and spend time with our family. I know I don't reflect enough on what we're doing great. So now you could argue we're the tallest of the short people, but still, at least we're tall. So in this sense. So anyway, that's all I have for official announcements, and then during Q&A, I can't wait for some questions for Griffin Nate. So.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Griffin Nate. I serve as Congressman Yakim's district director. I oversee all of his Indiana operations. It's a privilege to be here. Thanks to Stephen for inviting us and Jillian for setting this up. Really appreciate the Chamber's work and Farm Bureau's work here in in the county. It's also good to be alongside Representative Jordan. Fun fact for you, Representative Jordan was actually my first boss in politics, so I learned everything I know from Representative Jordan. So
I learned everything I know from him. You're gonna do what?
So I know one of the conversations the congressman and I have constantly is how lucky we are to live in the state of Indiana, because we truly are a state that works in many ways, and it's because of our hardworking state legislature that makes sure that we have a balanced budget. So we owe a lot of credit to our state legislature that works very hard to make sure we are fiscally sound. So I just wanted to give you a general update on what has happened in the past few months since the congressman has taken office. He took office in November, obviously under very difficult circumstances, replacing the late Congresswoman Jackie Jaworski. So he took over the remainder of her term in November in a special election, and then has served in a full term since January of this year. It is truly a pleasure and honor for him to serve this district. Obviously, we have 11 counties that we represent, and Fulton is definitely a very vibrant part of the district. You guys represent a huge manufacturing and agricultural stake in the district, so we're so grateful to count Fulton County in the 2nd Congressional District. So one of the things that the congressman has been focused on, that Representative Jordan touched on, is the lack of a balanced budget in Congress right now. So the congressman serves on 2 committees, one, the House Budget Committee, and the other, Transportation and Infrastructure. So one of the House Budget Committee's main responsibilities as the GOP has taken over the majority is making sure we return to fiscal stability at the federal government level. So they're taking a look at a number of things to try and see how we can get back towards a balanced budget nationally. So the House GOP Budget Committee is hard at work on that, and the congressman is very focused on that. On the transportation and infrastructure side, the congressman is on 3 different subcommittees. He's on aviation, which he's the vice chairman of as well. He was just named that. And then he's also serving on roads and highways, as well as railroads. Railroads is very timely, obviously, given the nature of the circumstances that have unfolded over the past couple of weeks. So we're obviously very busy. We've been staffing up, whether it be here in the district and in DC, but I wanted to let all of you know that we are fully operational here in the district now. We have 2 offices, one being right down the road in Rochester. That's open every single Thursday from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Please stop by, say hello. We have a staffer named Jacqueline that is always there. So please stop by, see Jacqueline if you ever need anything. And then, of course, our Mishawaka District office is also open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We can always be reached via phone, via email. If for some reason you don't have my contact information, please come and see me. One of the things, too, I wanted to note for you all is I wanted to introduce Mikey Freight. She just joined our team over here. Mikey's down here a fair amount. She's our Southern District field rep. So if for some reason you ever need anything, too, you'll see Mikey a lot down here, so I wanted to make sure I pointed her out. So with that, I wanted to be brief so we can take your questions. So thanks for having me again today.
Yes.
Good morning. I'm
Good
Kate
morning.
and I'm with the Rochester School Board. And my concern about, and I'm thrilled that the state is looking at funding textbooks because that's been an ongoing problem, and probably 40% of parents in all the districts that I've worked in don't pay it anyway, so this is going to help a little bit. But what I want to know is that going to be fully funded in addition to our ADM, or is that going to be something we have to take out of our ADM?
How we're doing it right now, and again, who knows where it's going to end up. How it came out in the House budget is a dollar amount that went into your ADM. So it's an incremental dollar amount, and I think it was around $200 per student. It might have been more. We changed it last minute, but who knows what the Senate is going to do with it. But the way it is right now is the money would go to the local schools, and then you pay for it. Because we were trying to think out, we set up separate accounts at the state level, and it got really tricky. So it's like, well, you folks know how to manage your money better than we do. So that's at least that's how it came out.
That would probably work fairly well for K through 8. But as students get into high school and they're choosing their classes, $200 for the school year will non-cut it, that might be a semester. Especially for kids with CTE classes and those who are doing the advanced placement, et cetera, those all have costs associated with them for the district. So my concern is that, I mean, I'm thrilled that you want to fund it, but I also am concerned about what we will have to give up to make up the difference between what the state decides and what is actually the actual cost of that is.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of discussion right now, because it's not just books, it's also, you know, the computers that replace books, and how do we, you know, how much money does it take to fund hardware? So really, that's still flexible as far as what that looks like and how it's done. So I share as a former 10-year school board member, I share your, not your angst, but your feasibility around it. So it's work in progress. So thank you. I agree with the comment.
Hey, Jack.
Happy birthday, belated.
I'm getting old. I'm getting closer to 50. I know this is more on the Senate side, but Jim Strader and I had brought something to the attention of Stacy and Brian Buchanan related to sales tax on nonprofits. And I believe, if I am correct, from what I understand, they said they were going to deal with it. There's a Senate Bill 222, nonprofit sales tax exemption, but there's not a lot of language in that bill. So I just kind of wanted to see if you knew of anything related to that.
Just came on my, it's funny because we're transitioning over, and it just came up on my radar screen on Monday.
Okay.
And so there was a general discussion around why it needs to be done. And then there's some unintended consequences that, again, we haven't dug in on yet on the House side, but it's fully on our radar screen. And it's funny because that's the first day that we got Senate bills, and that was one of the first things that came up.
Yeah,
So,
it's really important.
yeah.
I don't know if Jim probably would share. Jim knows all the details, but from what, you know, just the conciseness of it is that the tax that we would have to pay would take money away from the opportunity to provide scholarships to students. And so, Jim, I don't know if you have anything else that you would like to.
Yeah, besides extra dollars that's going to be taken away from the folks that want to help out the Treasury Outreach Club, the reporting requirements are substantial when you're talking about Lions and Kiwanis and stuff, and we're not getting paid. Lions all volunteer. To add that extra burden seems very counterproductive for the amount of money we're talking about that would go to the state. I mean, I would suggest that if there's a service organization that has no paid employees, everybody's volunteer, that should be an exemption on the sales tax. I know there's a lot of nonprofits that are not necessarily service clubs, and I don't know enough about that to talk about, but if you're talking about Kiwanis and Lions, Optimus, Rotary, that sort of thing, all volunteer, I mean, what's the point? Appreciate your support on that.
Yeah. I just remember the meeting I was in where we discussed it. Every Monday morning, we have a fiscal leaders meeting. It's the House Ways and Means Chair, myself, it's the Director of Budget, the State Budget Association, it's Senator Mitchler and another senator, and we just hash stuff out. And this one came up because there's a lot on the tax code that taxes nonprofits that was never really meant to be. And there's also rules in there about if Lions Club would have a product that they were selling the entire year, that would be taxable. And it's like, no, that's not really that's not the intent of the tax code. So again, I just know that it was a hot item this Monday, and we've got to fix it because it's just not the intent of the tax code to tax nonprofits for their money-making endeavors. So. Ooh, I'm glad I had a meeting on that. That was embarrassing.
So Senator Donald's not here. She was on the Energy Task Force Committee, and one of the recommendations was to get the cost of electricity in our state down in the lower 25% quartile by 2030. Are you aware of any actions that are being taken? I'm not aware of them, so I'm asking. Is there any action being taken to enable that to happen?
I sit close to Rep Soliday. So for those of you that are in the utilities world, he's kind of the House side, the rep of record, the Chairman Soliday, that deals with these issues. He has some initiatives that he thinks should help in that direction, but I haven't seen anything that I'm highly confident in yet this session. So I don't know if in the second half of the session we're going to see kind of how we influence our mix of energy, or that's an area that it's complicated, as you know better than me. So I guess second half, I'll be curious to see what we come up with to take the first step on that in the utilities world. So, and I know that he has 3 Senate bills went through yesterday on second reading, and I know one of them with the idea that we can take some steps to at least firm up our reliability, maybe not do stuff on the cost. So that's I don't know. Yeah, I've got a lot of work to do the second half to understand that. So I'm not on utility. For those of you in this room that don't understand why I might be a little blank on this one, is we're a committee-driven legislature. So if you're on a committee, that's your area of expertise, and then you need to trust some of your colleagues. I'm on Ways and Means, I'm on Education, I'm on Government and Regulatory Reform. So in those areas, I feel up to speed. On the other areas, I have to trust my colleagues to a certain degree. And utilities is so dang complicated, being regulated, and then you have transmission and those other things. So I hope the second half to get some insight into what we might do for cost.
I have a question. Jack, I'll give you to take a breath. We'll go back to Griffin. Thursday, you sent out notice about House, or HJ Resolution 27, the House against Biden's Lotus rule. Would you enlighten us on that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that's been hurting Hoosier farmers and farmers across the United States is the Biden administration's EPA proposal for Waters of the United States rules, right? So, and Rudy often has used this analogy, and I think it's appropriate, where if it rains a little bit and there's a puddle, somehow now that might be regulated by the EPA under these new WOTUS rules. So the House took a vote on Thursday, and I sent this out to some of our Farm Bureau folks, that basically would overturn that. Those new measures that are just, it's extra regulations that are not necessary, that are hurting Hoosier farmers. It's causing them backlogs because they have to deal with all these rules versus focusing on what they do best, right, which is farming and producing food for all of us to consume. So the House took a strong stand on that. That now goes to the Senate, and hopefully the Senate does in fact pass that, and then the President ultimately realizes that it's our job to get out of the way of farmers across the United States and allow them to, again, produce what they need to produce without all these barriers in the way.
Which is really important because we passed last year, the House passed a bill for Indiana Department of Environmental Management to not declare wetlands. I mean, I'm for wetlands when it's appropriate, but they were taking some lands that were puddles,
right.
Literally. I mean, we had testimony and pictures where Indiana Department of Environmental Management were not allowing farmers to reuse farms because their drainage got plugged up and things like that. And then the issue became that, well, it's not really a state that's pushing it, it's the feds that are forcing our regulators to do it. So that's really good news. So that's where kind of, at every level, it's like the feds tell us stuff to do, and then we tell the county council and commissioners what to do, and never tell judges what to do, that's for sure.
Hi, I'm Krista with Fulton Hospital. So first, thank you so much for the hospital assessment fee being dropped. That's going to be a huge help to this county. I do have a question though. As birthdays are dropping, there is the opportunity of maternity deserts happening, and many in the surrounding counties, surrounding Fulton, have closed maternity services due to social economics. Right, 60% of births that are born within the hospital are Medicaid, which means communities that we're unfortunately losing money upon that. Has there been any more discussion of targeting hospitals that are fighting to keep into rural communities that are returning wards open to help give them some support on a national and maybe even on a state level?
I'll go first on that one. In the House budget, this doesn't affect, well, we did the fees, we did lower our proposed House budget to hospitals. And so, which I never actually knew about until your CEO enlightened me on how much you guys pay. I mean, that was just crazy.
$3
And
million.
then- Yeah, just crazy. And so, in the first go round, we increased Medicaid reimbursement for physician services, our proposal from 82% of Medicare to 90% of Medicare, because people can't find doctors. I mean, the doctors won't accept them as patients. Now, the discussion we did have is what do we do with hospital reimbursement on Medicaid? And that's where we pulled up a little short. I'm not saying we won't get there this session, but that's the next discussion on where do we put Medicaid reimbursement vis-a-vis Medicare. Do we increase rates for hospitals? And I would argue, I mean, that for rural hospitals, you almost have to do it because it's a money loser. You know what I mean? And when 50%, for example, reimburse of our Medicaid, you just can't. That's not a sustainable business model. So anyway, that's the next level discussion on the budget. We didn't put in the House budget. Some of it is for negotiation, just to be honest with you. So, sorry.
I always know it's a hot topic.
Yeah.
And to speak to that at the federal level, I'll tell you, actually, we've been in a lot of discussions lately with hospital CEOs, hospital leadership. Actually, it was just last week, was in a meeting with the president of St. Joe Health System in Mishawaka. I've met your CEO. Actually, he and I are planning to sit down in the near future as well. I know one of the things that's very off balance right now is, I believe it's 27 cents to the dollar of Medicaid expenses are reimbursed, right? And then 82 cents, I believe, around that range. It's 80-something cents in Medicare that are reimbursed. And so we've heard that loud and clear. And one of the things, too, we want to make sure is that rural healthcare continues to be accessible, because obviously the 2nd Congressional District is primarily a rural district. Actually, I still receive my primary care from Woodlawn, so it's very personal. We're definitely taking a look at that. And I know the Ways and Means Committee in the House is definitely taking a look at that. I will say, one of the things that's been expressed to us by these health systems is, hey, we're not expecting you to, give us every single thing, right? We just need to make some progress. And maternity is one of those things, because I know, unfortunately, as we look across the state, the maternity wards are kind of dropping off the map slowly but surely. And that's one of the things we've reiterated in our meetings with hospital leadership. We want to make sure services do not disappear, so every individual can continue to access healthcare. So it's definitely something the House is continuing to look at, and will continue to look into for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
For those in the room, the thing that's maddening is there's a couple of urban hospital systems that are just making buku bucks, and the rural hospitals just getting hammered. And so it's how do you get that, thread that needle so they're not having a boondoggle with some of these big healthcare systems and leaving the rural hospitals to the wayside. I mean, that's the needle that has to be thread. So, but that's why we're here, I guess. Yes, sir.
So you're an actor, and this discussion is very sensitive in Akron because we lost our ambulance from exactly what we've been talking about. Lutheran told us that the most like 80-some% of the runs here in Akron were Medicaid runs, and they couldn't do that anymore, so they pulled our ambulance. So anything that can be done to help, commissioners and the county council are working on trying to get us something, but it's a sensitive subject here in Akron.
It's funny you say that, because we were talking about Senate Bill 4 earlier. Senate Bill 4, it's a public health bill, but part of it is EMS related as far as services for EMS, to have money going toward that. Because you're right, Akron, heard about that a few months ago. When you're dealing with strokes, that minutes matter, that's scary. So that's part of Senate Bill 4 as it comes over to the House.
And that continues to be on our radar as well. I know I've talked to Gail, who runs your 911 here quite a bit. Gail and I have been working on a number of things. One of the other things I would mention, just to note here in the county, obviously there's been a significant issue with the 911 dispatch center moving that over. So we've been trying to help maneuver that process, and we'll continue to do so. And on the Lutheran side too, we'll continue to be involved as needed as well. So that certainly continues to be on the radar. We'll continue to monitor that.
Yeah. On that Ford, Senate Bill 4, you said ambulance services. Does the county got to run their own ambulance service to qualify for that though?
I do not know.
You don't know that one? Okay.
I mean, I guess probably yes, given how it's really pushed out to the county. I mean, the way Senate bill came over, and again, I haven't read all of it yet, is it's a county-centric bill at this point. So I would assume yes. Yeah.
And I was going to say,
Of course.
911's been a nightmare. They stepped up and they almost stepped up and helped us through it. We appreciate all that.
We're ready to get it done. I'll look forward to coming down to the day where we can visit the jail and everything is there, right? We don't have to go to separate locations. So.
Jack, I just noticed House Bill 1132, it's a land use task force. Very generic, says, talks about areas where food security exists. Can you talk about that a little bit? That's kind of intriguing.
A little bit. It was Kendall Culp, who's the vice president of Farm Bureau. That's his bill, I think, if it's the one I'm thinking
Yeah, it's
of.
authored by Rep. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what you might know better than myself, put you on the spot, as far as it's an initiative to make sure farmland isn't unduly jeopardized by federal and state regulations as well as other things. I think it's just a macro land use, but with an emphasis on what's going to happen to farmland. So
Is it in combination to the Senate bill about the residential TIF district?
no, his bill doesn't deal with TIFs.
Okay, so this is something separate.
Yeah, this is something completely separate. Have a task force to look at.
It is a step in Indiana to, one of the primary focuses, I believe, was to try and prevent any foreign-based companies from purchasing farmland in the state of Indiana. That and taking away productive farm ground for other projects.
And
Hey,
go ahead.
have you guys followed the? Now this is one that should get our name dropped. Indiana Economic Development Corporation. They're buying a whole bunch of land in Boone County, and they're paying $80,000 an acre, first of all, which is just crazy. And then they plotted this thing out, and they forgot, for an industrial park, and listen, they forgot about water. There's no water there. So now they're talking about it's going to take $1 billion to bring water in. And so this is where, we want to fund economic development, but the IEDC has lost some credibility for this whole Boone County fiasco. So anyway, to throw an agency under the bus. So we're wrestling at the budget level on what do we do with funding this agency? I mean, if they $80,000 an acre, and it's basically, Hope and I lived a couple miles from there for years, and it's farmland, and that just disrupts everything as far as the value of land and farming.
And one of the things I was going to mention too, just while we're talking about foreign investment, especially in farmland, one of the things that Congressman Yaka and the House Republican caucus has been taking a very close look at is actually China is coming into the United States and acquiring a bunch of farmland. So we're keeping a close eye on that. That's been a frequent point of discussion. In fact, I'll just make for your awareness, actually, it was a bipartisan bill that actually created a select committee on China to kind of investigate their influence throughout the United States right now. So that's one of the things, too, the majority is taking a look at, making sure that China is not intruding upon our farmland and making sure that Hoosiers and our entire country's farmers continue to have access to farmland.
So this is not an opportunity to squelch economic development. It's more an opportunity to make sure that farmers and economic development are married and that everything is working effectively.
I would think, yeah. I mean, that would be my take. Yeah.
Well, we had a conversation about that residential TIF bill that came through, very passionate farmer was talking about that and how the TIF, they're concerned about residential TIF, and I think Indiana Farm Bureau is involved in that as well, so trying to understand. We're very agriculture based, so how does that work for the county? What does that look like, and how does that relate to us? And
There's several TIF, there's a Senate TIF bill, there was a House TIF bill that died on the floor. But Farm Bureau is intimately involved in the whole TIF discussion because as the House bill was set up, it was going to reduce residential, it wasn't going to reduce residential taxes, but it was going to result in potentially shifting the farmland taxes. So that's the math didn't work for all parties involved, basically. So, yeah.
so they're still researching.
Yeah, there's still work going on TIF. Because here's the issue is Fulton County doesn't have TIF out of control. You know what I mean? You're using it appropriately. But there are some counties where up to 25% of their assessed value is being TIF'd. And so I think Fulton County's at 5.3, I might be wrong. But there are 4 or 5 counties where it's 25% of their assessed value, so that goes directly to cutting off funding for schools and for police officers and ambulance services. And so it's out of control in some counties, but not Fulton, so you don't need to worry about it, I think.
So it's just a chance to be able to ensure that TIF is used effectively so that no one entity is
Exactly.
impacted.
Yeah, exactly. So, and just some transparency. I didn't know there's some, like down in southern Indiana, in Albany, the city of New Albany has TIF about everything, and there's no transparency. The mayor's using it for student scholarships, and it's like, wow, that's interesting. See how? Yeah, it's interesting.
Just overall agriculture, and that's the other realm I live in. I live in the school board realm about 4 days a week, or 4 nights a month, and then the rest of the time I live with the farmer. And what's going on with taxes and property taxes at this point in time is, in my personal opinion, insane. Our local taxes are going up, and it's because somebody taxed them, But when you look at an 18% increase in farm ground, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. We bought our first farm in 1979, and I was 20 and he was 25. And we didn't think we'd ever see the end of that debt for that first 125 and a half acres, because the half acre counted, okay, big time. And we eventually paid that farm off. We still farm that farm, and we have purchased other property. Well, we in the bank have purchased, all my banker friends are here, but we've purchased property from them, or through that. And then the taxes go up, and some of that farm ground we might have paid. That first one was $22.50 an acre, and today people are going, you lucky dog, but back then that was like the high point, highest day farm ground hit. And that ground to us is still worth $22.50 an acre unless we sell it. Because we are a traditional family farm with 4th generation actively working the farm, that ground, the only way to get money out of that farm, we do take a crop off of it, but we also have unbelievable inputs going in as compared to years past. So the break-even point gets smaller and smaller. Now we're going to increase the tax on that by 18% and maybe 20% next year. And unless I sell that farm, I can't necessarily have the capital to do that. We're now running a business, a farm business, and fiscally that cuts into production and other things that we need to spend money on. So, I was going to suggest that every farmer in the state of Indiana who owns land, grab a 5-gallon bucket, fill it full of dirt, and we're going to walk up to the State House and say, here's your taxes. Because we look really good on paper, but there's not a lot of liquid, and we put put 3 kids through college working hard because you can't pay for 4 years of Purdue with a bucket of dirt. And that's where all our assets are. So we don't have tons of liquid bouncing around to go, oh yeah, we'll just pay the tax man this much, we'll pay the federal government this much, and oh, go ahead and raise our property taxes, it doesn't bother us. It cuts into every farmer in the country or in the state. And if you, if you're worried about foreign entities purchasing property at $80,000 an acre, that's awfully hard to pass up when you're struggling to pay the taxes, etc., on the property and keep the equipment. Have you looked at the price of a combine lately? We're talking $500,000, and that's without the corner beanhead with it. That's just the machine. So those things are, it's just such a weird business that everybody wants their finger in the pie, and they expect the farmers to just continue to pay up. So I have a personal issue with that. If anybody wants to join me, taking a 5-gallon bucket of dirt to the State House, just give me a call. Watch out, Jack.
I'm going to throw some of the people in this room under the bus. Because we, at the state level, have constitutionally worked hard the last 8 years to cap property tax. I mean, that was a battle. It was a good battle that we capped residential 1, 2, and 3. So at the state level, we've capped taxes. Beyond that, the cap is the cap. You can go up to it. So your local officials have flexibility with your tax rates. I'm feeling uncomfortable right now, but that bucket of dirt might want to go to other officials in the state and federal officials, because we cap it, and then local officials have the ability to lower their. That's just how that works. So.
And I'm gonna just come back to that, and I'm making a wild guess, but then the taxes, because it's capped, the taxes at the local level have to go up to meet the unfunded mandates that are coming from the State House.
That's probably a good point.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, that's a great point.
Everybody.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would own that. So the dirt does come back to the State House. I tried.
Representative Jordan?
Yeah.
My being a member of the Indiana Coalition for Public Education, by the way, the website is just like it sounds, except instead of ending in education, just ed.org. I'm very concerned about my tax dollars being used to fund privatization of K through 12 education. I do have a question. However, I would like first to provide some context. Every Indiana public school is losing money because of privatization. One method, there are others. There are several other methods by which this is happening. But one method of privatizing education is vouchers. The Choice Scholarship Program, also known as vouchers, decreases funding for all public school students. Even if no students leave their school district to use a voucher, and even if there are no voucher accepting schools in a district, as is often the case in small or rural school districts, the school district still loses money. These numbers that I'm going to share in a moment are rounded to the nearest dollar. They are the school district share if voucher money was included in the basic tuition support grant, thus the bucket of funding. By the way, here's a graphic with some of the information I'm referring to, plus the other means by which this privatization is taking place. I have copies available if anyone would like one before they leave. The numbers are for the most recent 5 years and include the first part of this school year. So, what are some of the numbers for the area school districts? During this 5-year period I just referred to, Caston has lost $754,000. Rochester schools, $1,800,000. $833,086. Tippecanoe Valley, $1,948,930. Eastern Pulaski, thus Winnemac, $1,095,570. Argus, $971,913. And Culver, $908,438. To find the amounts for all Indiana public school systems on the Google map, just use the web address tinyurl.com/IN vouchers. Again, that's tinyurl.com/IN for Indiana vouchers. When the voucher program was begun in 2011, it was intended for students in poverty. However, now a family of 4 with an income of $154,000 can get a voucher. That's currently. This year's House proposed budget increases that to $220,000 for a family of 4. Vouchers are essentially a government subsidy for private schools. Representative Jordan, you voted for the proposed budget in recent weeks. The $220,000 figure I just referred to. Furthermore, you've been in office, I believe, about 7 years. So here's the question. Representative Jordan, how do you justify your votes for the current budget and the past votes regarding vouchers, knowing the loss of dollars to the public school systems in your district?
I have 2 comments on that. One is, I'm a strong supporter of parents raising their kids. I'm a strong supporter of parents raising their kids. I wake up in the morning, I want parents to have flexibility in raising their kids. I go into some of these Indianapolis schools, there are jails. They go through they have to go through security like they're at an airport. And so I'm sitting there going, shouldn't that kid have an ability to go to a school that their parents would be excited about, like the Oaks Academy? Shouldn't they? I mean, who am I to tell a parent that they have to send their kid to a war zone, a drug-infested war zone, or they could go to a Christian school? That's easy for me. I love parents raising their kids at whatever school they want to take them. The money goes to the voucher, not to the school.
You don't represent the people.
So wait, let me finish. So that's one thing. I'm a Christian, and the Bible tells me clearly, parents are responsible to raise their kids. And so I want the money to follow the child. That's just, and we can disagree philosophically. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to waver on that one. The second thing is, it's interesting math, because I'm very familiar with that math, is the math confuses me because the scholarship for the voucher that goes to parents is like $5,700. The amount of money that goes to, excuse me, to the public schools is $7,000 some dollars. So the way that math is done is kind of backwards, because how we actually do the budget is we have this lump sum of money. You get a dollar amount for 90% for vouchers, you get 100% for public schools, and you get property tax, and you get federal funds. And so, really, I could argue just as strongly that vouchers are saving money, the taxpayers' money. You know what I mean? Because I'm only paying $5,000 for this student. I'm not paying $7,000. So numbers work both ways. But I'll get back to my original point: is you can agree with me violently on anti-vouchers. I've got a lot of friends that do, but I'm just committed to parents. I'm committed to parents getting to send their kids where they want to send them. So that's, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. It's just who I am. Yes.
As a follow-up, again, the issue isn't parents having an opportunity to have a private education for the child. That's not the issue. The issue is for it to be tax supported by the state of Indiana. Secondly, and somewhat a little, not making a digression here, Gary, Indiana schools, I believe, have been under state control for a couple of years, correct? Did that have any adverse effect on the other school systems in Indiana by the state taking control of Gary, Indiana schools? I don't know, I'm asking.
Well, there was so much corruption up there. It was just horrible.
Did it have
So-
any adverse effect on the other school systems?
No,
in
it's a
Indiana?
positive effect because we found all this money that they're embezzling and using it appropriately, so that has come back into the school.
The reason why I raised that about Gary schools is you referred to the Indianapolis school system a moment ago. By the way, I'm a graduate of the Indianapolis public school system. But my point with regards to you raising Indianapolis and what...
Well, just an example.
Pardon? I
Just an
understand.
example.
But if the Indianapolis public schools are so bad, and I don't know that they are,
I didn't say all of them were.
but if they are, why did the state not take control of the Indianapolis public school system? And thus it would not have had any detrimental effect on other school systems in Indiana.
There wasn't the fraud and abuse and going on in IPS. In Gary, it was just ran rampant, so. Yeah.
Well, my only final comment regarding this, regarding voucher schools, is since 2011, that's when vouchers first came about in Indiana, over 1.4 billion public tax dollars have been siphoned away from our children's public schools to private, nearly all religious schools.
Again, that's one way to do the math. The other way to do the math is taxpayers are paying $5,800 for a voucher, or taxpayers are paying $7,800 for the public school.
There's no
funding.
question that a quality education is expensive. Indiana needs to face up to that with regards to its public school system. Thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean, it just, again, I have no hard feelings for you. I hope you don't have any toward me. We just philosophically disagree on vouchers, and that's okay. I mean,
Interesting
Yeah.
point that you served on, was it the Bremen School Board for 10 years?
yeah.
And now
Yeah,
reflecting...
and what's really interesting is when I served on the Bremen School Board is the time when we're going to have public-to-public transfer. Guess who the loudest voice at the Indiana School Board Association was to promote public-to-public transfer? It was me, because I love parents to have flexibility. I love competition because things get better and teachers get more excited and administrators get more excited to do things when there's competition. Monopolies don't work. They don't work. So as a Bremen School Board member, I can remember plain as day, I was at the ISBA conference, there were 290 people to vote on public-to-public transfer from the Indiana School Board Association delegates. The vote was 288-2. It was myself and Bernie up in New Carlisle who said, this is good. We want to show how great Bremen is. We want to. If we get less students, we do. If we get more students, we do. It's exciting to be in the marketplace and to be competing for students and trying to meet parents' needs and trying to help kids reach their God-given potential. I love it. I love it. So as a school board member, I was right on the front line, excited about it, and will continue to be excited.
How is that relevant to privatization of schools?
Because that was the first step. Our first step was public to public, and then the next step was vouchers there, which I supported too. So even as a school board member, because I love parents having opportunities to send their kids where they need to go. And as Bremen Pool School Board member, I'm going, this is an exciting opportunity. We can get students from South Bend to get them a great education. We have a great FFA. We do other things. I love it. Just love parents having the opportunity to send their kids where they want to go, whether public or private school. But I love it. And probably a lot of people in this room disagree with me, but I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. He disagrees with me, maybe. Yes.
I'll change to the federal government.
Okay, good.
other parts of the government that do a great job still throwing money into the system. And we have what appears to be brinkmanship economics coming up, which doesn't add a lot of good potential for stability for the economy. I'm just kind of curious position on that.
Yeah, so what's been happening in the past couple of years that's not helped with inflation, not helped with the Fed and all that, right, is unfortunately we've been literally flying airplanes across the country basically and dropping plane loads of cash essentially, right? We're throwing money at every single problem and expecting it to be fixed right now. So one of the things that the House Budget Committee is focused on at this point is seeing how can we make small strides to reduce federal spending overall, right? That will make a significant difference as we're moving forward when it comes to the debt ceiling and stuff like that. Because if we reduce spending overall, we're going to be in a much better path physically coming forward than we are right now. It all starts with spending. And reducing spending is the main focus of the House Budget Committee right now. As it pertains to the debt ceiling, obviously, that is forthcoming. I can tell you at this point, obviously, the U.S. has not defaulted on that debt. Obviously, that has been a big talking point. They're not close to that yet. And defaulting on the debt looks like it appears to be many different ways, depending on who you talk to, right? The Treasury Department has their own definition, and then other people have their own definitions. What's really important with the House GOP and what Congressman Youngkin is looking at is how can we reduce spending to make sure that we don't get to this point time and time again.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
And maybe it's kind of what you asked too, is what does the path look like? Because it looks like the Biden and Senate are going to just
with the debt ceiling specifically?
Yeah.
So, I mean, here's the good news. If you look at the picture overall, like not specifically on spending, there's been small strides that have been able to go through with even bipartisan cooperation. I named China earlier, right? That was a bipartisan effort to start that committee. Whether it be just last week, this DC crime bill, I'm not sure if some of you have heard about that. There was a whole kerfuffle over in DC, they wanted to basically take away punishment for a lot of crimes. So both the House and the Senate worked together on that, and then the President ultimately is going to sign that bill. So there's actually been bipartisan cooperation, and I do think, because the stakes are so high with this type of situation, I think Republicans and Democrats alike know that the path we're on right now is not sustainable. So I do think there's a pathway forward, and again, what House Republicans are focused on, the House GOP Budget Committee is coming up with right now, is a common sense approach. It's not a partisan approach, it's a common sense approach. How can we reduce spending in a way that satisfies as many people as possible? And again, that might look different ways as we're going through the process. I can tell you they're working on the House budget right now. The Biden administration released their budget yesterday, which unfortunately would continue to pile on debt. We just can't continue to do that. That's just not sustainable. So we have seen some bipartisan strides, so I do think there's potential out there for continued cooperation. So.
I have a question for Griffin. 2 Americans were killed by a drug cartel in Mexico this week. I guess 2 questions. One, and the drug cartel issued an apology, and then I think Representative Crenshaw had some harsh comments, and the response from the President of Mexico was to criticize Representative Crenshaw and say that he would attempt to prevent his re-election. And one, is there any congressional pressure for the State Department to issue some meaningful response or statement? And 2, what does one have to major in to become a press secretary for a drug cartel? If you know.
So good question on, unfortunately what is happening at the border is extremely sad. I mean, it's sickening to watch what is unfolding at our southern border. And one of the things, if you saw Congressman Youngkin out on the campaign trail in the fall, one of the things he focused on primarily was 3 different aspects: inflation, security as a whole, and then energy independence, okay? And so the security as a whole component encompassed immigration within it. Immigration is an issue that affects everybody in this room. It affects our entire country, right? And there's a lot of different ideas for solutions out there, but one of the things the House GOP is focused on, and Congressman Yakum is focused on, is making sure that we as a country are safe and secure here in the country. And that starts obviously at the border. So I know they're taking a look at a number of different pathways now. Obviously, they've only had the majority, right, since January, so I know they're trying to move as fast as possible, but that's something I know the Judiciary Committee is working on right now, is to try and see how can we get at least a solution that obviously the Senate and then the President will ultimately pick up on, right? The House can pass as many things as they want right now. As I was alluding to just a second ago, we just have to get to a point where we can also get it past the Senate and the President to sign it. But everybody knows, and Congressman Yakum knows, that, you know, this is a significant issue. We've got a serious safety issue down there, and our hearts were broken when we saw earlier this week that tragedy. And so Congressman Yakum has continued to be focused on that. It's just a matter of coming up with a solution right now that can be passed through all chambers, if that makes sense. But on the press secretary question, that I don't know. I defer you to them. I'm not sure on the qualifications.
Okay, we've got time for maybe one more if there is. If not, we'll go ahead and adjourn for the morning. Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming. We appreciate it. And I do want to also say thank you to RTC Channel 4 for coming today. So that has been recorded and will be available later on if you would like to go back to it and use it as a reference. So on behalf of Fulton County Farm Bureau and Fulton County Chamber of Commerce, thank you for coming out today. This was our last legislative breakfast for this season, so we appreciate you coming. And if you have any questions about future events, definitely go to hold of Jillian and the Chamber office, and they will direct you with that. If you have any questions for Farm Bureau, feel free to call our office there in Rochester, and we will do our best to get back with you for an answer. One last thing I want to mention, if you are interested, especially during sessions, Indiana Farm Bureau has every Friday, we have Farm Bureau calls. So at noon on Friday, you can dial in or go on to a web call, and it is legislative updates throughout the state of Indiana. And that is a free service provided by Farm Bureau. If you are interested in getting that notification, so it usually comes Thursday, sometimes Wednesday, you'll get an email with the phone number or the Zoom link. Then you can access that on Friday at noon to get in on that Farm Bureau call. And again, it's just legislative updates every week. So if you're interested in that, get a hold of me, or you can call the Farm Bureau office and give them your name and a phone number, and especially an email address. We'll get you added to that list. So if there's nothing else, we thank you for coming out this morning, and we will see you throughout the year. So thank you.